As China-U.S. relations are engaged in a complicated phase, the technology, especially the semiconductor industry, is becoming the heart of this long-running battle. China, as one of the world's leading purchasers of semiconductors, is ramping up its chip industry to catch up with the global peers and reduce its reliance on foreign technologies. So how have the China-U.S. trade tensions affected the global semiconductor supply chains? And what are the prospects of China's semiconductor industry? How long will it take for China to close the gap with the U.S.? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Michael Chen, Managing Director of Hina Group, and Professor Chunzhang Chen at the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, gentlemen. Given the current trade tensions between the two biggest economies, what do you think of the impact of such trade disputes upon, for example, the semiconductor industries in both economies? Michael?
I think from my personal perspective, the impact on both countries, we can see that we see the stocks of the IC companies of the United States go down. And their revenue forecast goes down as well. And for Chinese domestic IC companies, we have seen they lower their revenue forecast as well, but it's a different reason. United States IC companies is due to the embargo, but regarding the Chinese domestic companies, it was due to the product company lower the inventory, causing the problems. But however, for the long-term perspective, it's very optimistic for Chinese domestic IC companies. It's due to the whole country realized the criticality of the semiconductor. Other than that, we have seen a lot of product companies voluntarily to adopt Chinese local companies' IC. Other than that, we have seen lots of the resource injected to the same semiconductor industry. And more importantly, back to the July, we have seen, we call it Science and Technology Innovations Board, which is STOCK, get launched. It's a big thing for the entire Chinese local companies.
Well, this is enough reason to worry President Trump in his attempt to slow down China's development in the semiconductor industry. But my question for CZ is whether we're going to have yet another issue of overcapacity. Look at what happened to Wuxi, where we have the biggest solar panel producers, and he went bankrupt due to blunt investment, an excessive investment in this particular area. What do you think of the importance of the government's vision and its guideline in shaping the prospects of China's semiconductor industry? Are we going to repeat the same mistakes of overcapacity?
First of all, I'd like to add a few comments to what Michael just said about the impact of the semiconductor wars, what's been happening from a year ago. The first, I think, the whole country and the general public become aware of what the semiconductor is, or what IC or integrated circuit, or commonly known as computer chips or computing chips. So people are familiar with this terminology and what they are. They're actually playing an important role in people's daily life, in their smartphones, especially every day. A second impact is on the technology background. People didn't know what semiconductor, what IC is, and now they heard about that. The technology is so complex, so hardly to design, to make, or to manufacturing. The technology we know, for example, people often hear about the process sizes, which today's advanced technology is around 10 nanometers or 7 nanometers. So you know how what's the size of the human hair? The diameter is about
human hair.
Yeah, human hair. Yes, about 50 micrometer. That's about 1/100th of 1 millimeter of probably a credit card thickness. But the technology in the IC chip, in the manufacturing, is 1,000 less of that size. So imagine about that technology advancement, people now know it's so difficult to make, to manufacturing. And third one is people are more familiar with the economy, because people didn't know how much expensive to create or to make the chips. Now, if you buy one of the key equipment in the manufacturing, which is called a lithograph, if you want to remember the short name, is EUV, extreme ultraviolet, that's made by the Netherlands. You know how the cost is? It's about 120 or even 200 million US dollars for one equipment. You need a whole aeroplane like a Boeing to transport it. So people know now they are much concerned about this from technology, the difficult how to design and how to make, and how much money we need to spend on that.
There's no question about the vision of the Chinese leadership, the political will, and the very issue of financing. The issue, let me go back to my question about overcapacity. Are you worried that we're going to repeat the same mistake of producing too much, investing too much?
Based upon the data what I have, if we are talking about the semiconductor capacity, wafer production capacity, currently China only have is about 12.5% of the whole world, ranking as a number 5, even behind United States. Number 1 is China, Taiwan. So come back to here. Actually, China's capacity regarding a wafer is not that big. I don't think there's an issue about this.
You don't think there's such an issue? Let's look at the importance of the semiconductor chips. In the 1980s, we were familiar with wording such as super semiconductor in designing whatever advanced technologies and products. But why all of a sudden we have entered into the 5G area and people find themselves talking increasingly the importance of chips? What does that mean for the change of our lifestyle in the 21st century?
Actually, if you take a look at the GDP structure, there's a big portion of a GDP is from the IT. And the foundation of IT is a semiconductor. And if you do more elaboration on the whole thing, actually the military power, all the military weapons, the foundation is on IT, but also on the chip as well. And if you are talking about a Boeing, this kind of flight craft, and their foundation is on the material, but also on the IT and on the chips as well. You're talking about our communication, our social network, and our mobile finance, even the purchasing, our daily life, even our entertainment, everything is based upon the IT, which is a semiconductor. So without a semiconductor, you don't have the IT, you don't have the modernization of life. So it's very important. There's a movie called Die Hard 5, if you ever seen that, Die Hard 4. Okay, in the movie, there's it's talking about the terrorism attack. They attack the internet, cyber, and suddenly, and there's a lot of a disaster happen. For example, the traffic light out of the order, and the dam, which is a dam, and the gate were open, and caused lots of a flood. So that is a big problem without the internet, without the semiconductor. So semiconductor is very critical to human beings' life. And talking about 5G, 5G even have a broader bandwidth, and it's going to change our lifestyle entirely. For example, the communication, for example, 3D, for example, entertainment. So it's going to change. It's a totally a paradigm shift. It's not a pure upgrade. It's a paradigm shift.
Therefore, no wonder a cover story of The Economist, my favorite journal, says that current battles for 5G is actually competition for leadership in this digital technology.
Exactly. Because IT affects a big portion of our GDP structure.
How many years are we behind the United States? What do you think of the gap? Are you optimistic that we're going to close the gap by the year 2025?
The gap itself is a big word if we compare the whole semiconductor between U.S. and China. If we just look at the semiconductor itself, it covers a wide variety of subjects. Like we normally talk about integrated circuits or IC or chips, and then devices. Devices is another area of semiconductor. So in each of these areas, there is a different gap. So if we look at the semiconductor itself again, it is composed of two major parts. About 80% is what we call chips or IC or integrated circuits. The another 20%, we call that DOS. Not the DOS operating system, but easy to remember that. D stands for the device, O stands for optoelectronics, and S stands for sensors and MEMS. But today, since you are asking or we are discussing about the 5G or IoT, if we expand to the wider area, Internet of Things. So with the 5G technology and lots of the technology, we have to focus on devices and the DOS area, which in the past, in general, behind of the IC sectors. For example, in the 5G technology, we need some advanced materials and a manufacturing process. For example, the typical example is gallium arsenide. It's a chemical. And if people, I think our students from middle school, they have learned the chemical element or chemical periodical table. And there, in the past, when we start to learn, there were 104 elements. Today, later 108, and today it's over 120 or so. And all of the elements, or at least the majority, are used in the semiconductor industry. And especially recently, people talk about the real element. It's called a lanthanide family. There are about 15 elements there, which in the past people didn't care about it. But today, they are being used in the advanced technology. So that's why we are saying semiconductor is complex, and the gap between each of the technology can be different. In some areas, probably the gap is small. But if we want to say overall gap, probably 3 or some areas 5 years, depending on if we are talking about the design, if we are talking about the material itself, or it's depending on if we are going to manufacturing these materials into real objects.
And Dr. Chen's CZ's comments, I would like to add a couple comments here. Because when you're talking about an ecosystem, actually ecosystem consists of two portions of an ecosystem. One is a global semiconductor supply chain. For example, at the current moment, what we have seen is the United States is for design and the equipment, and then Japan is for the material, and China is for testing and packaging, which is all set. But there's one thing we need to know about that. Actually, in the past 6 decades, United States in Silicon Valley, he has developed 6 segments of the ecosystem, found the application and business model per se. For example, one is a semiconductor, Intel, like AMD, and we know the software, like Adobe, and like a SAP, this kind of a software. This is very critical, okay? And the other one is the equipment, EDA. On the top, we see the networking company, like a Cisco, this kind of company, okay? Then a computer system company, like a Hewlett-Packard, like this kind of company, and all Apple, these kind of companies. On the top is the internet service. When we are talking about the semiconductor, we should focus on the entire ecosystem. For example, back to the 1980s, if we are talking about how to catch up, we should look back to the historic event. Back to the 1980s when I arrived in the United States to pursue my degree. It's very fascinating. At that moment, Japan was #1. There was a professor who wrote a book, Japan #1. But United States, they call up one wave of the killer app, which is a PC and laptop. PC and laptop was originated from the Silicon Valley, which is Apple. And that wave made a big giant, which is Intel and Microsoft. By that wave, they catch up. and put the Japan behind and even surpass the Japan. I would say it's an entire ecosystem. It's not easy to catch up because in the whole ecosystem, it contains a lot of interdependency. It's very difficult to detach. Only one operating system is one of the alternative solution because based upon operating system, you need to have a lot of app store, and a lot of application software. So I would say it will take a long time to catch it up. This is my take about this.
President Trump and his team really want to decouple the Chinese economy. They don't want China to assume the leadership in digital technology. However, recently, he may have given a second thought to his what is called by the media simplistic and if not the clumsy decision to totally suspend the supply of either technologies or operating system, Android, for example, to Huawei. He has somehow decided to resume parts of the supply. Why do you think we had this second thought from President Trump and his team? CZ.
We all know President Trump has a big background on the business, so he's a businessman. So if we look at the other track, technically, we have experienced from the 1980s, 1990s about the semiconductor IC technology used in our daily life. In the past, we call that 3C, computer, communications, and consumers. And later on, we evolved from that area into probably more than 10 years ago, the Apple computer company started with the iPhone. People are using iPhones or smartphones every day. Now today, if we look at the technology itself today, we are moving to the big data, artificial intelligence, and IoT, and 5G. And then from the business perspective, we have to look at the market. Who are the big users? So China, of course, is the number one. It has the number one market for the ordinary people, for the general public to use that. So I would guess, I'm not sure if President Trump has believed that China is a major market. We cannot do everything as he thought in the past.
So you also go back to the issue of ecosystem. China is simply indispensable in forming this global supply chain. Let's look at smartphone. China is less competitive. For example, we have top 5 smartphone companies, Samsung, Huawei, Apple, Xiaomi, and Vivo. 3 of them are Chinese companies. But when we look at the ecosystem, do you think we see increasingly the interrelationship and the relevance for each other? How important is it for Huawei to assume the leading role?
Huawei is very critical. Actually, Huawei is one of the few companies can provide from the base station to the switching router to the cellular phone. It's a vertical company. It's a technology company. So it is critical not only to China but also to the world. And we just discussed about IoT and AI, artificial intelligence, all of the possibilities. Actually, this kind of possibility all built upon the 5G, and 5G is built upon this kind of technology. And there's a very critical component. It's not only the chip, but also the cellular phone. And back on here, and if we look back on why China can do the cellular phone and why we cannot do the chips, I think it's a different core competence. Because the smartphone manufacturing focuses on the operation, but also on the distribution. However, the semiconductor, which is chip design and the manufacturing, it takes lots of long time to accumulate all this kind of technology and talent. So it's a totally different animals.
Totally different animals. So what do you think about the importance of Hongmeng? Will it utterly replace Android? At the same time, we are clearly aware that Mr. Ren Zhengfei, founding chairman of Huawei, said this technology company badly needs more mathematicians. Has the issue of how to attract enough talented professionals in the semiconductor industry. Are you both confident and optimistic that currently we only have some 400,000 such professionals. In the near future, in about a couple of years, we'll roll out more measures to have those professionals who live up to the expectations of not only Huawei, but indeed the whole semiconductor industry of the Chinese government. CZ.
Huawei is a great company. Not only Chinese people know that, also in the United States, in the Western Europe, they all know Huawei has contributed not only in the industry and business side, selling the smartphones and as well as the equipment. They are also doing great in the technology development, especially in the recent years. People have seen that published on the news channel. So Huawei can not only design, for example, its subsidiary, what is called a high silicon. They are really doing the design on the computer chips or computing chips. So today, if we compare with Huawei and Apple company, so originally, as a student or engineer, probably we would see or think a company is great. You can do a simple or individual product, but it's not complete. From the other side of the view, you can say a company, if it has the capability of integrating all of the products together. So Huawei and Apple are these companies. Originally, they didn't do everything themselves. They have a capability to integrate everything. Apple didn't design the computing chips themselves, but they recruited a big team to do the design. So from that point of view, back to your original question about the Plan B or the home operating system, we have seen that historically many things come and go, they come back and forth. So originally we had one system, then you always have two systems in parallel competing with each other, and some of them may die, but today people are becoming smarter in today's world, especially like Huawei. I would bet that Huawei home system will eventually take some rules in the long-term run, but we cannot say it will be there forever because it depends on the technology, the people, the company culture, the management, and the whole world environment.
Whatever advanced technologies, the job got to be done by talented, brilliant professionals. Let's go back to the issue of how many more such engineers, scientists, mathematicians, technicians are needed at this moment for China to catch up with the U.S. and other advanced economies?
My personal perspective actually is different from what you ask. Actually, quantity matter, but it's not that critical. Okay, quantity matters, but most important is the accumulation and quality. This is my take. Because just like what I stated, in the past 6 decades, Silicon Valley has accumulated lots of the talent, knowledge, pattern, capital, but also he formed an ecosystem.
But given the hostile policies and animosity that is increasing so fast in the U.S.-China relationship, it's no easy job to attract similar professionals from Silicon Valley any longer. People like you have a very strong Silicon background, but I'm afraid people with similar background will find it difficult to come back, given different barriers that the Trump administration is setting up deliberately. Are you still optimistic that people like you can find their way back to China, and despite the lethal attraction of cash salaries, for example, by Mr. Ren Zhengfei of Huawei, why should such brilliant technicians and professionals easily come back? Is it easy?
I would like to return to, yes, it's easy to come back, and it's a great time to come back. It's the darkest time, but also it's the brightest time. Why? Why?
We live in great times, but also bad times.
That's why it's a good time, but also it's a bad time. Why? Because it's always two-sided. You see the bad opportunity, bad timing. On the other side, there's is a lot of opportunities here. For example, the band and the tension between the U.S. and China, it caused lots of opportunities that happen in China, lots of resources injected in domestic semiconductor industry, and everyone realizes the criticality of a semiconductor. We just see the new stock ball just get open, but also we see lots of happening, lots of things are happening. It's a great opportunities. Never be a good time for semiconductor professional like here. I would say we should come back. You should come back. It's a great time for here.
Do you believe that China will have to live with a parallel technology world?
My personal take on this, I fully trust that semiconductor is a global industry. Collaboration and openness is very critical. And,
yeah, I agree.
And I think healthy competition in one ecosystem is okay. For example, if Huawei has a home operating system, it is more than welcome join this competition and to build an ecosystem instead of creating a parallel market or system. Parallel to me is no common ground. It means incompatibility. It means a war. It means a fragmental market. So it's not preferred by rest of the world because it's not good for the world. Okay, I would like to say is collaboration and openness lead to possibility and peace. This is the only way for the whole world. It's good for the whole world. Yeah. Trump administration, he only had 4 years term, maybe another 4 years. But what's the next? So I would say collaboration and openness is a strategy and policy. Actually, it's the best strategy and policy for the entire world.
Okay. During the Clinton administration, the issue of human rights was separated from the MFN, most favored trading nation status, in the hope that China could possibly be transformed into one of them. However, today, there's this pervasive sentiment in the United States, shared by both Democrats and Republicans across the aisle in the D.C., that China will be a different country. With that, we come to the end of this discussion. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.